Buenos días de nuevo a todos.
Good afternoon, good morning everyone, and welcome once again to the Entrepreneurship Hall. Before we start, I would like to remind you that we have a Twitter account at INCIBE where you can participate and follow the event, and you've got the hashtag 12ENISE. Now we will start this next panel, which is about the link between startups and large companies, and how these links are managed when a startup gets integrated within the structure of an M&A. As the title suggests, first, the startup needs to dance with the M&A. But what happens when time goes by and the company grows? Well, there is some stress moments. I will give the floor to Ms. Gutiérrez, which is the moderator of this panel. Daniela, you've got the floor.
Bueno, buenos días a todo el público presente, a los
good morning everyone, good morning to those following us from the streaming service. It's a pleasure for me to be here today. My name is Tatiana Gutiérrez, and it's great to be here in this 12th ENISE. Thanks to INCIBE to allow me to moderate these great professionals that are here, from left to right or right to left, where we have Mr. Sarwat Shaker, Carlos Moreira, Daniel Solis, José Ramón Palanco, and Miguel Rego, who's getting the microphone and will come to the stand in a few seconds. First of all, I would like to introduce Mr. Sarwat,
que es vicepresidente de Alianzas Estratégicas y Nuevos Productos de ElevenPaths, la unidad global de ciberseguridad de Telefónica.
which is the global unit of cybersecurity of Telefonica. He's an expert in identity management and electronic signature. He's got a book, DNIE, Technology and Uses, and he's a member of the subcommittee of normalization of ID cards and biometrics. During his previous career, he was the CEO of Smart Access, Director of Professional Services of the branch of Microsoft in Spain for the public sectors, healthcare and education, and project manager at NCR, participated in several projects related to intelligent smart card, and he's got the floor. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here today. It's great to share this panel with my colleagues. Well, just in a few words, my background is something that has been already been presented, introduced by Tatiana. I've been working in the field for the 30 past years, not in cybersecurity, because 30 years ago there was a few opportunities to develop a career in cybersecurity, but I have the privilege of being a part of a company, 11ENISE, within the Telefonica group, which leads the global unit in this area. So focusing on the topic of the panel, maybe we can move on to the next slide, and I would like to focus on the tools that we have at the Telefonica group. This is a summary. You can see several tools that can be used to support startups and companies that want to develop in cybersecurity or would like to become entrepreneurs in this field. We have WIDA is the accelerator of the group. They have academies across the Telefonica region where Telefonica has a presence. They help companies that need some support by investing at least up to 150 million euros in those companies. You can see there some of the companies like Countercraft, 3 Ants, which are companies where investment has been done recently, and there's been an acceleration and support. Then we have the Telefonica Ventures mechanism for those companies that need to expand and need to become international, and we invest around 200,000 euros. And some of them are here today, like Blueliv, 4IQ, Custodio. All these are companies that were born in Spain, and different investment. They have received different investments. And then we have the traditional department that everyone has, which is the M&A department, where we acquire when it's deemed that the technology is strategic for the company. Then we decide to acquire them fully. And you see the cases of Smart Access, Dinoflux, which is also there in the slide. Some thoughts on this. Well, I've been part of the process of acquisition. I was the CEO of Smart Access, so I hope you can excuse me because I'm going to speak about myself. But I know about this process of acquisition. In general terms, these processes tend to be more difficult, more complex than an investment. You really need to know the company and all the commitments that they have acquired, and on average it takes around a year. In the field where we're working, which is the field of startups, is normally a year. A year in the life of a startup. It's a year where you have to deliver information, and even though you don't want to, you have to focus on something else, not only on what makes the business grow. So deciding to enter an acquisition process is a complex decision, because you have to decide if you have this division of things that you want to put your efforts in. So one of the things that tip the balance for that decision is that during that year there are negotiations, and something relevant happens. Usually the prices, the amounts of acquisition in Spain when compared to other mature markets as Israel or the United States are normally lower. This has reasons. It's not a coincidence, and sometimes there is a ratio of 1 to 10. So if a company develops their business in the States or in Israel, they may receive better or more relevant investment acquisitions. And finally, when an acquisition happens, particularly in the field of telecoms, what happens is that technologies, the acquired technologies, not always have a return in turnover. The telecoms companies want to keep growing in the business because their core is not selling cybersecurity. They want to provide added value. We are in an environment where there is a huge demand for professionals in cybersecurity, and some of the acquisitions are done not through only acquisition of intellectual property, but also through talent acquisition and patent acquisition that could be used later on. So there is a diversity in the whys, the reasons why, and sometimes when you opt for an acquisition, you have to put your efforts in other sides of the business. And that's it from me. Thank you very much. And now we will introduce Carlos Moreira, Investment Director of Sonae IM. He leads the investment in software of cybersecurity and telecoms in Sonae IM. He has more than 15 years of experience in M&A, strategic planning, and other roles related to technology in this area. You've got the floor. Thank you very much for the invitation introduction, and congratulations on this initiative. I will do this speech in Spanish. I hope it's well. Well, about this Sonae, I think that I have to give you a small introduction. This group is a Portuguese merger working in telecoms and retail with other companies. And we have a holding aimed at investment in technology, and we don't do it for M&A. We have a different department for that, but we want to invest in technology and have a return on investment. The entry into cybersecurity was in 2013, 2014, and we invested in three things at the same time: cybersecurity, which is the most relevant, telecom software, and retail as well. Our tickets are about 2-3 million, and we do acquisitions. And we also have a vehicle to invest in early stages of the companies. So we have a way of doing investments from at the early stages of a company and support them when they are in an initial stage. And in terms of cybersecurity, for us, this was something new in 2013. We started basically from zero, but this was an area that we really wanted to be present in. And the first thing that we did was create a group that was very interesting and which had high capacities in cybersecurity. And this entry allowed us to do other things to add in the service component. And then from that moment, things started to get better, because the startups, when the technology startups want to find investors, they have to find strategic investors. They have to find investors that are close to the market to get that ability to get the talent as well to face other challenges of the process. So this service acquisition was very good for us to identify the areas where we had to invest and at the same time to help them. And we also helped the services side, because innovative technologies allows the services to be more competitive. That's why this strategy is the one that we are supporting, because it's been very fruitful. Thank you very much. Now we have Daniel Solis, CEO and founder of Blueliv. He's worked for more than 20 years in the sector, and he has a wide development internationally in cybersecurity. He has converted Blueliv in one of the main providers of intelligence of threats in Europe. Recently, he's ensured a second investment of Series E of 4,000 million euros, and he's led international projects on safety for companies in the Fortune 500 in Europe and Latin America. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm glad to be here today. We are a company that basically focus on internet for companies. Traditional manufacturers of security want to know what's happening. We are the ones providing intelligence, and we understand how they work, how they could be attacked, and we see what type of information could be leaked outside the perimeter. We started in 2009. We are the basic startup that started from scratch, this bootstrapping. We created different prototypes. We had different ideas. We knew that cybersecurity needed to change. There needed to be some progress because the baddies were getting there, getting over the barriers, and we created prototypes. And then we started to leave from the services because we needed some cash at those early stages. While doing these prototypes, we found a key thing to have an impact on the market, and then from there we started to move the company towards that product, which is this cyber intelligence platform that we have, and we have 100 customers in 29 countries. We started at an international in an international environment. I have a friend in security, Carlos Moreno, who said that if you were Charlie Brown, it would be easier because his name means Charlie Brown, Carlos Moreno. So we started to look outside, abroad. We wanted to get some customers, and once we had the base, we started to find potential investors. And then we did partnerships with Telefonica, for example, who got very interested in our platform, and they gave us more appeal. And from there, we started to do the rounds, and in 2013, we had SIG Capital, and we received 1,000,042, and these, in 27th of July 2017, we got 2 million more with risk capital, plus the ones we had before, and then we received investment from business angels from Silicon Valley. I could tell you more things. It's been hard. It's been very tough. We've been internationally recognized. We've received an award as well in cyber intelligence, and currently we work in Europe mainly, and we have a very solid team in the UK, in Spain obviously, and then in the United States. But the stronghold is in Spain basically. And well, I'll tell you a little bit more later. It would be good if you ask questions, because we have a different experience, and the approach is always different. So for those who want to become entrepreneurs, we can help you. Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. Then we have José Ramón Palanco, Vice President of Threat Intelligence in ElevenPaths. Is the unity of cybersecurity of the Telefonica Group. Is founder of Dinoflux, a startup of threat intelligence acquired by Telefonica. He studied telecoms engineering at the University of Alcalá de Henares. He's an MA in IT government from the University of Deusto, and he's been a speaker at the OWASP, RootCon, Malcon, and FAQ in other places. Thank you very much for your introduction. I wanted to tell you a bit more about a startup that was acquired in a different way from other startups that get more appeal. Is the case of Dinoflux. This is a threat intelligence platform, and what it did was try to obtain information on threats to share this intelligence through any device. At that time, technology was very interesting. We managed to get a technology that had no leveraging, which might sound very good but sometimes you can get advantages when negotiating with investors, but it wasn't exactly like that. When you talk about venture capital, you see that they had this leverage, and that you rack up debt, because if you have debt with an entity that has lent you money, you have a commitment. That's what you look for when you have risk capital. You need to have a commitment. So we had a startup, we had some pilots that were working, but we realized that this market was fast moving, and we had those two options. We had to go ahead with the technology, because we knew that we wanted to bring our technology to its highest potential, and the market was moving very fast. We realized that we had to make a decision. If we accepted an investment, then we knew that you could get a capital of $500,000, $1 million, but money goes very fast. The goal of the round is to prepare the next one. You cannot just wait to run out of money to go to the next round. So we were working with companies in our, we were competing with companies in our same sector, and it was difficult for us to compete with them. One of the disadvantages of being acquired is you lose some control over the technology, but you are within a company organization that will allow you to compete in better conditions than other startups that have received investment. So an acquisition process is a long process. You know when you start negotiating, when you get the first proposal, you know when you start, you don't know when you will finish. You have to have your plans, you cannot stop working, you have to keep on with your operations, and the goal is to show that you're doing well during the acquisition process. Maybe during the process you'll have to have due diligence, but also I don't think the microphone is working. Well, I was saying not only the technological aspect, but also the financial aspect and your business model. You have to overcome this in a good way to continue with your decision, and you need to be ready for changes. You know there is going to be changes. Once your startup is acquired, maybe the product ends up being something different that you didn't expect. You are not part of the team. There is another team who is ready to manage the product, and then you are on a second plane, and you have to be ready for these changes. Thank you very much. Well, yeah, I have something else to say. Well, we made the decision, and we negotiated with Telefonica, with ElevenPaths. As I was saying, this was a very long process. It took us about a year, and we are very happy with our decision. Today, our Dinoflux is a Telefonica platform that offers its own intelligence. It's been integrated within some services of ElevenPaths, and in our particular case, we've been allowed and developed the roadmap. I think this is very important to us to develop our ideas, our plans, and the best thing is that we have the best resources in terms of sales, marketing, auto-market, and development of the business. Thank you very much. Last but not least, we have Miguel Rego, a partner of iHackLabs, a company specialized in cybersecurity and training and simulation. He is a lieutenant colonel of the Spanish Army, and he has several postgraduates and certifications related with government and ICT management. He is my former Director General of INCIBE. He collaborated with the OAS in Latin America, and he works also as a collaborator and teacher in the masters and international forums. He's been cybersecurity leader of EY, of technological risks in Deloitte, and he's worked with ONO as well, and had different positions related to cybersecurity in the Ministry of Defense. He is currently the Councillor. Good morning, and thank you, Tatiana, for inviting me here. And despite what you've been saying, well, thank you very much. I will tell you about this new project, which is the iHackLabs. As Tatiana was saying, this is a company aimed at developing virtual environments, virtualized, with the greatest accuracy possible. We want to base it in cloud to get the best advantages of this, and we create different use cases as you can see on the screen. Everything is possible. We can determine the level of resilience of systems. We can evaluate processes, assessors, and Rames was saying something similar. We've detected that there is a great opportunity to change the model in which we are training and building capacity with the professionals in cybersecurity. This is for two reasons. First, it's clear that there is a lack of professionals because we are becoming more digital and we have to build the systems in a more reliable and safe way. But also, there is another reason. The cybersecurity professional, once they're employed, they have a real necessity to adapt to a change in reality. We know that the traditional education model is not enough. So we basically try to, well, all of us working in cybersecurity know that we have to continuously improve, and we want to add this as well to what we do. So we have this approach, and we started in January of this year with this approach. In September last year, I had the chance to meet the two founders of two hackers Spanish that were working for the UK, and they decided to create a company that was focused on training and technical training, hands-on training based on virtual labs similar to SysLab maybe. But in September, I had the chance to meet them. I really liked what they were doing. And in my time at INCIBE, it reminded me of my time in INCIBE when trying to create exercises, trying to reach more people. So based on that idea, they had the ability to sell me the idea. They made me optimistic about this ability to sell the idea to other people, and I decided to join the company. We were working to give it a greater approach, not leave training behind. So we started working in January. What I can say in my experience as an entrepreneur, well, despite my CV and my age, I'm happy. But I can say that it's not easy. You can have a very good idea, you can have an implemented solution, you can have the contacts, but you also need two things: a little bit of luck and someone who believes in you and can support you. So this is the path I've been in. We are an early startup. We are happy with the results. We are in the blue figures, the great blue figures. We've managed to convince two investors to be part, support the company with two goals: stabilize the cash flow so that we can have a good growth in positioning. We will work in marketing and improving user experience, and we've had the chance to be part of a program in the UK with the National Police Forces of the UK. We collaborate with the forces of Spain as well, and we've selected we've been one of the 170 selected companies, and these are good news for us. These will allow us to grow in the UK, and this program will help us. So in my experience, what I can share, and I will conclude, it's a tough experience, but very positive at this moment. So I invite you to join the Entrepreneur Club if you're thinking about it. Thank you very much, Miguel.
Let's start the debate. If you have any questions, the audience. Good morning. Very first questions, different to those that other people do. Carlos, for example, does Europe need a very big champion in cybersecurity as it is the goal? That is the first question. And for Daniel, what should what should we not do to avoid any mistakes, to learn from our experience? And for the other participants, and for you, Rams, how do you know that you're working really hard with all the companies that you buy? Thank you, Carlos. Europe needs a very big player in cybersecurity. They have some relevant players already, and we even think that it's a strategic topic for Europe. Now, Europe has a peculiarity, and is that we have some countries, and all the countries want to have their own cybersecurity provider, especially now that we are in the most demanding time. Those global players in cybersecurity must be a proximity player, and that is the true challenge, how to do this in a way that we don't lose the proximity in each of the markets, and that is what we're trying. And even in Spain, in the Iberian Peninsula, I think we have managed to deal with this challenge. And now we have just closed an agreement in Benelux. It is still not announced, and it contributes on this too. Thank you, Daniel. Well, yes, I think it's a very interesting question, because not making mistakes, it's almost impossible, and we always have to fail, but when we do it, we must do it cheap and in a cheap way. So when you start a company, usually what you have in your mind and the reality don't look alike. So you have to avoid some key mistakes, and especially to correct them very fast. One of the things that we have seen, for example, is that when you start, you have some compromises with your customers, some written letters, and then they tell you, we are starting in the crisis, so we cannot hire you. So how can I move on with this problem? So for us, the solution was to move abroad, and this also helps to expand. So if it were different here, like in the US, we would have done it differently. So I think we should all believe more in what we have here in Spain. It's good that the whole industry talk about the entrepreneurs, but definitely we need some help in this, and to have some space to try and to expand. And I think this is one of the main issues. Any other entrepreneur that wants to speak? Yes, well, I'm in the way of making many mistakes yet, but because the cybersecurity thing is very fast, we have a memory here of 10 months. So I think it's very important to know which type of company want to do this. We have to avoid generalities and go towards specialization. It seems obvious, but we cannot be a product, but it's not the same to be a product company or a service company. And this changes especially when you talk with investors, because the product, they like it, but then the service they don't. So it's an issue with the scalability, and it's a very interesting thought. And then looking inside, usually the company must be extremely pure. This means very tight costs for that is only necessary, and with the fighting economy, really, literally, and that is very relevant to control very tightly all the costs and the costs that come from the demand of a growth that is not really justified. This is my experience. José Ramón, do you want to say anything? Yes, I think that the most important thing for the startups, and it's something that we rarely do, is to measure. If you measure everything you do, you can make up a decision about if you're doing it correctly or if you have to change things. So if you're going to make a mistake, you have to try to make that those mistakes are the less as possible and as cheap as possible. So you should make your decisions depending on your results. Thank you, Ravis. So how do we know that we are working fast and doing all that we can? Well, I think that making mistakes is not something that belongs only to the startups. Sometimes we do, and sometimes we take leverage out of this, and some other times we have made some acquisitions that we have not been able to use correctly. So I think the important thing is to know the reason why we are acquiring that, startup. If we are interested in their technology, in their position, the talent, perhaps not knowing this is what makes us make mistakes. But if we have very clear why we do things and we try to create a goal, that is when we do things in a more appropriate way. Any other question? Well, then I'll do another question. Mr. Palanco. What are the advantages that you see between selling or buying the company? So we were accelerated by INCIBE events, so we were getting prepared to be invested. We were preparing for different areas such as selling and business development, marketing, and this has been quite useful for us, but we haven't chosen this way. So in fact, we were in a showroom that it was quite visible. We could access different customers, such as venture capital and some other organizations. They proposed us to be acquired. But finally, from the very beginning, almost, we went for Telefonica. They give us huge trust, taking into account all the options that we had, especially because we had all the negotiating process already settled up, and it was very closed for us, so we didn't have a lot of doubts into this. I think that the main advantages here, I've already talked about them. So basically what we have is the same product that we had before, with the advantages that an organization such as Telefonica can offer for the marketing department, the commercial area, the selling area. So not only this, but we have it all over the world, in Spain, in Latin America, Peru, Colombia, and I think that it's one of our main advantages for us at this moment. And I think we now can compete with other companies that we could not, which we could not before. And from the other side, Mr. Solis, Blueliv has grown according to financing roles. What is another way of seeing this? Well, truly, I think that acquisition can take place because of many different motives. You have fusions and investments. So let's start with acquisitions. Acquisitions want to acquire your technology, or someone wants to complete their portfolio or their solutions or their industry. The buyers come around these areas. So it's a very long process. It's not easy. And we had some intentions of buying at some point, but we stopped each other. And we had a financial company or an industrial company, and in the end we decided not to move forward because we wanted to keep being a company and doing the things we were doing on our own. When you had some investment, the advantage is that you can create product and vary the market continuously, and in the end there's a point where you have to use that money to advance the company, and that is where we are at right now. If you don't negotiate with an investor that can complement you somehow, that can complement your portfolio or give you customers or help you grow in your market, then it's a bad investment. The money, you can get it, but you have to use it intelligently. And the fusion, the merging, for me, it's either die or survive. Mergers are quite complicated. It depends on how you do it. For example, you can find two different companies with different culture, and depending on how this goes, you can win or not. So I think the entrepreneur here doesn't get a lot of retribution from the financial point of view, because there are changes and so if you have some goals, some AX goals, it's complicated. So at least for me, it's very complicated. So for me, the best thing is to make the company big or being acquired. But this is totally a dance at every moment. So it's a very complicated process. Thank you, Daniel. I think there was a question here from the audience. Thank you. Yes, I have a question for Mr. Solis and for Mr. Rego.
Disculpe, una pregunta para el señor Solis y para el señor Rego. Con el conocimiento de cada uno de ustedes.
With what you know at this moment, what would you do if you were an investor?
Viéndose desde el otro lado.
From your point of view.
Es la misma pregunta, pero para el señor Moreira.
And it's the same question for Mr. Moreira. So you have invested in manufacturing companies, and you invest with different formulas. So do you ever think to do those initiatives or to be on the other side as a manufacturer, not as a service provider? Excuse me, we couldn't hear it very well. Can you repeat? Yes. So would you develop technological tools, those that you have bought as a service company? Would you be a manufacturer of those products, of the services that we provide? Yes, but like from those companies that you have bought. Miguel, please. Well, if I had an investment portfolio, I would invest in cybersecurity, but the problem is that I don't have money enough in my pocket. But I'm not going to be able to do it because all the indicators of the evolution of the market, what shows that when you take that decision as an investment mechanism, it's highly profitable. So some indicators mentioned that you can get 7 times what you have invested in 3 or 4 years. So it's quite interesting. Obviously, you cannot do anything, and not everything is potentially successful or has the same benefit. But definitely, there are many tools at this moment in the market, many observatories that are analyzing the trends and the demands, and in a way that these decisions that you're taking now have the lowest risk possible. So perhaps, maybe not now, but in a few years, right, Danny? When we are in another life, we can invest. Yeah, I like that you said this from that point of view. Actually, from my point of view, I totally agree. It's a debate that we can move on and on. There are so many variables and so many issues to take into account. But considering the question that you just did, from my point of view and my experience, I would take into account a few things, just the idea and how it has been implemented. So some people tell me, I have idea, but don't tell me anyone. It's like, well, don't tell me anything else, because probably this has already been made. So what I want to know is how you're going to solve this, and then how are you going to protect your intellectual property? And Spaniard people, we are very bad at this. But it's necessary because it protects the investment and the investor, and it also helps to have something to fight with. And then, of course, the team. So if someone has put money on, you have something of value there. But then what everybody does and how they complement each other. So I realized that if I wanted to go there fast, I needed to go alone, but if I wanted to be there very fast, I needed to be always with someone. So I have a very good team with me from the very beginning, and they must be fast when moving and everything. So you can talk about your product on and on and on, but if you cannot sell it, it's useless. Carlos, please. So just some responses for this. First, in the strategies of buy and build, there's a lot of sense of looking for solutions that will enrich the services that we provide, and we do that if it's needed. And on the other side, and this is something that we are doing too, the technologies in which we invest together with other investors that can bring other added value, we do it in a very focused way. So we, before doing any investment, we identify the segment in which we are interested to invest. And then we see the opportunities of investments all over the world. And this is also to bring some benefit to all the players in the service. So there's another perspective, that is, if we transform to the product, the services to product, and how we can do that in a good way. So for the scalability of a company, it's always to have that internal challenge of how to simplify, to be able to deal with the different market segments. So sometimes they need some functions, and sometimes what you need is to democratize cybersecurity, and for this you need very linked, and you need this to be very linked so the companies can invest on this. So that is why we are also investing in the US in products that focuses on the small companies that can use an engineer for 300 customers. Any other questions? So we move on. Rames. So Telefonica is a leader in cybersecurity, and they are always investing in startups. And we have seen that many of the people here have gotten in touch with you to reach an agreement. So how can you get up to know the little entrepreneur, the little startups, and how do you assess them? Can you tell us about this? Yes, of course. Well, thank you for that definition of that we are innovators. But usually we have the official channels, the traditional channels of other companies. We do some callings through Telefonica Ventures and websites. This is a way for startups to get in touch with us. However, many of the companies that reach to us reaches us through very informal channels like LinkedIn, or they write directly to Tema or Pedro Pablo, and that is the way that startups get in touch with us. So I think the problem is not getting in touch with, which I think we are quite accessible. But I would like to explain that in the process, every year we analyze near 200 companies, 200 startups. So we have a specialized company team for this. It's a nice team that cooperates with other areas of the companies, and we do we do the technical assessment, and others do the financial assessment. But especially, it's the type of startup that we can demand. So the idea is that we should create disruptive innovation. So most ideas, 95% of them, have already been invented. So it is very difficult to be in the total innovation. However, we depend a lot on the innovation from the US or Israel. So what we need is to have some business models that are sustainable and some technologies that can improve not only the technology, but the way of reaching the market or how you offer the service to the customer and things like that. So from those 200 startups that we assess, we end up acquiring or investing on near 10 or 12, which is less than 5%. We have to reject many of them. We are sure that what we have to do is explaining why we haven't chosen them, because it is as important as the ones that we have chosen. So just telling them that it's a good idea, but we miss this, or we think it's more interesting if you do this or that. Thank you. One question here in the audience. A question for everyone. Let's talk about the public administration. Do they do their homework? Do they get scolded because they don't do enough? Or if they are doing things? Finally, one more question for you. One company from a long time has fallen in ATT. How do you value that? How do you value the fact that a U.S. operator acquired it? So, as a public administration, let's focus in the entrepreneurship, because if we talk about everything, we don't have enough time. So let's start, if you want, by Miguel. So my opinion is that many things have been done, but there are still many things to do. I want to think that the importance that the cybersecurity national strategy gives to the entrepreneurship and talent in cybersecurity have two key elements, and you can see this very clearly. So I think this is not translated then with all the importance that it should have. So I miss. So what I miss is the renovation of the old trusting plan, which started very, very strongly, but then it's fallen down, and it's allowed INCIBE to keep on going. But we need a whole lot more power from the administration. So I feel very bad when I think about the 65 million that the British government has spent in cybersecurity, 65 million pounds, and I think we could do more here. Carlos, in Portugal, the public administration is doing similar programs to those here in Spain. Well, I think we have to look at both countries and what they are doing, and also considering the starting point. So I think they're doing a very strong and significant effort in both countries, and I think there is a point which I think is totally critical and strategical, which is the talent. And when we speak about talent, we talk about power and giving the companies of services and cybersecurity some power, but also starters. So this is why this type of initiatives is excellent, because the talent development game that can feed the European places, if we approach it from a very strategic point of view here in the Iberian Peninsula, we can get a lot of things. So we can talk about an Iberian talent here in cybersecurity. So I think it's a fact. I think it's important to guarantee the closeness of customers, but for me, the talent is very important. Daniel, yes, I agree with what Miguel said. It's true that everything has changed quite a lot. I think we're doing a great job here. And 2 years ago, we started using and it's helped us a lot with contacts and to solve problems. But what I see is that one of the biggest problems for capital is that when we have to value the idea, we have thousands of things to take care of, a huge bureaucracy to develop this idea, and I think this should be corrected. Once you are bigger, you have more capacity to solve these problems, but you need certain volume of marketing. But I think what Miguel said is quite important. The government should have some money, and I'm going to give you some money for you to move this forward. So I think INCIBE has done very interesting things with this, with the accelerator, because they have filled this gap. So we have these participative budgets, and that's interesting. José Ramón? Yes, I think that Danny is right. So when we started with the program of acceleration in INCIBE, that is when we learned that there was some help from the administration for startups. Of course, then you need some amount of work to be able to access to it. They ask you for some documentation. Basically, you need one person just to do this. And usually startups have a very limited staff, and they are quite tight in this. So it's difficult for them. So yes, there are some helps for this, but usually startups don't have the way to get to this. And from Adam Bolt and TNT, I can only celebrate that it's a Spanish company and some technology from Spain to be acquired for a very important provider as AT&T, and also we haven't been able to capitalize the talent in Europe. But it seems logical conclusions from the point of view of the market size. So the biggest market is still in the US, and they are way above us in numbers. Some consulting companies, I think they are talking about 20 million in the investments. They are doing acquisitions, and 5,000 million what they're investing. So we are talking about $25 million market, which is quite far away from us. So if someone has a very good product and they want to sell it, they have to go there where there are buyers that are willing to pay some for it. So I celebrate that, but I understand it as a logical consequence. So we would like that the European Union and the governments could help us so the European market is every time more important, and we can invest here. But currently it's very difficult in Europe to get this. Well, thank you all. Any other question? The last question? Good morning. Well, I would like to ask Rames and Daniel, if you had a cybersecurity company of about 10 years, consolidated financially, that is stable, that is solid, which option would you use out of the three I'm going to mention? One would be to acquire. One would be to be acquired by others. Another to be to keep going on their own. Well, for me, I don't know. It depends. So if the company is healthy financially, just let it go. But you also have to think. So if it were me, I wouldn't do anything, not even in a spin-off. And I'm going to say the same. It depends. I guess it depends on how hungry you are as an entrepreneur on whatever you want to achieve. I've been in that situation. I haven't been 10 years. I've been 9 years until I decided that it was better for my company to sell it and not keep on growing. But if your mission is to expand that product, and if you are convinced that that product can reach other markets, you have several mechanisms, but probably a big company can help you out to make that decisions. Usually you always have more than one alternative, and you can choose, and then you can, in the future, you can look back and decide if you did the correct thing or not. Well, thank you very much. There is nothing else. There's no time for more. So finally, what do you think? A partner for dancing, living together, or eternal love? Well, I thank you very much for being here, and it's been a pleasure. I hope this can help you out in your future. Thank you very much.